All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's ITE meeting. We have Tony here presenting about SFMTA planning, and he's also running for Western District Secretary Treasurer. So we're going to give him a few minutes to tell us a little bit more about himself, and then we'll get started on the presentation.
Okay. So let me just make sure I'm like standing in a. Okay, that seems to work on the camera. And people online, are you hearing us? Just to confirm. Okay, got a thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Had a chance to chat with many as people have come in or have met otherwise. I'm Tony Henderson. I'm a candidate for Western District Secretary Treasurer. I'm also an SFA area section member. Doing a little bit of a roadshow where I can, talking with the different sections about why I'm running. And for those of you who were at the last meeting, I gave a brief intro last time, but this time I have a little bit more together on it. That was right as the campaign was started. So a little bit about myself. I'm currently the section administrator for the San Francisco Bay Area section. I've served in all roles of the section leadership and was president back in 2021. I've been past president and representative to the Western District for 2 years as well. At the Western District level, I served on the 2019 annual meeting, LAC, where I was a hotel chair. And I've also been fortunate to attend many of the Western District annual meetings and have presented a total of 6 times at those meetings. A little bit about me professionally. I'm an engineer with the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, where I work on our transit engineering team as a team lead for our safety operations and transit safety operations and planning. Basically, I focus on the integration of transportation engineering with transit operations and safety. I've also, and this is the reason I'm presenting tonight, kind of developed a side gig for doing large-scale special event organizational preparedness and operations. I worked on the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. I'm sure many people here at least somewhat experienced the big impact that in San Francisco. I led our agency's coordination for that. I also led our coordination for NBA All-Star, which I'll be talking about now. And I'm a Cal Poly San Luis Obispo alum. So why I'm running for Western District, just feel like it's a good opportunity to continue to give back to ITE. The Western District's been a large part of my career. San Francisco Bay Area section has as well. I'm really running on 2 main goals: is to sustain and expand the Western District's long-standing offerings, providing high quality, cost-effective training, professional activities, and such. And also champion transportation safety. Safety is really the core of all of our work, and I'm glad to see IT's been so proactive with that, and look to hopefully continue that as I continue to work with ITE. So I do have a website up with some information, tony4ite.com. Would greatly appreciate any support and happy to chat with anyone if any questions about what I'm running. But with that, Ashley, should I just go into my presentation or did you? Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. So I'll just hop into the presentation. So I don't think I need to introduce myself again. I'm still the same person. So about NBA All-Star, this was held back in February, the 14th through 16th. Probably won't note right away, February 14th is Valentine's Day. The 17th was actually President's Day, so a lot of things going on that weekend. I personally am not a basketball person. I learned a lot about the NBA through this process. This is one of the NBA's largest events. It has a very, very high ratio of VIP and VVIP attendees. I was told at one point that it was considered one of the highest net worth events in professional sports. Albeit with how attendance was this last year, I don't know if they held that statistic, but that definitely factored into a lot of the preparations that were needed. It's hosted by the Golden State Warriors at Chase Center in San Francisco. So how these events usually work is that teams bid to host it, and they are really doing a lot of the legwork to meet the NBA's requirements with NBA oversight. There are additional events on this side of the bay at Oakland Arena, at Valkyrie's practice facility, just kind of down the street here. And there are also numerous ancillary events throughout the region. I was able to sneak into the arena on Friday afternoon and got an unofficial tour, so did get a few cool pictures of inside, but I was not there during any of the events itself. So, some of the significant events and location, the core all-star events are really three main nights: Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The Rising Star Game, the NBA All-Star Saturday Night. This is the Skills Challenge and the Slam Dunk competition, which for many people is actually the more interesting of the events. And Saturday night was particularly crucial for us, which I'll get into in a moment. Then the All-Star Game itself on Sunday. Other events that were going around, there was the Celebrity Game and HBCU Classic that was held over here in Oakland Arena. They also did have some ticketed practices that were midday. There was a concert series at Pier 48, which is just a little bit north along the waterfront from Chase Center. Powell and Market Street, the cable car turnaround, I'll touch on that. There's a lot of activations in that area. And there's a fan experience called an NBA Crossover at Moscone Center. So a big concurrent event happened that same weekend, which is the Chinese New Year parade. This is a very significant, culturally significant event for San Francisco. It is one of the oldest and largest. I think it may be the oldest and largest, but I couldn't actually verify that. So it's definitely one of the oldest and largest events of its kind in US. It results in major street closures and transit reroutes. We use the term gridlock quite often when trying to explain what the streets were going to be like around downtown that day. And this had major impacts on being able to move people between the hotels and the event centers, which I'll show a little bit in a moment. I don't think I ever got an exact count, or there's never going to be an exact count for an event like this, but I don't think I ever got an estimate. But on a good weather weekend, the parade will bring around 200 to 250,000 people. And I think we were hitting around that this year. It was a pretty decent night, and it looked like there was pretty good crowds out. And as I mentioned, there's also President's Day weekend. Transportation needs, this was a big part of the planning that went into the event. The NBA was selling tickets as an experience. So while you could go and buy a single seat to the game, they were expensive tickets. They were really catering to people traveling in. So quite often that meant your ticket came with a hotel, it came with transportation provided. And because of that, they set up basically a mini transit system for the NBA. I forget the number, I want to say it's about 80 to 90 buses and about 2,000 to 3,000 car service vehicles that were brought in. The 80 to 90 buses alone is larger than a lot of suburban transit agencies. Then you add in all the car service. So people, depending on how much they spent, either got a chauffeured driver, if they spent a lot, or had access to these private shuttles. People were also not required to take that. They could use whatever modes of transportation they wanted. We did offer a lot of enhanced transit service as well. But for crowd, is my mouse moving on the screen? It is not. I'll point. Chase Center is like down here-ish relative to this map. All the hotels were in Financial District, Union Square, Soma area. Really significant because the parade cuts through Market and goes right through all of here, and it just bifurcates the city. And it really does cause a lot of gridlock through there. Thankfully, the NBA, we had to say it until we were blue in our face, and thankfully police and the mayor's office backed us up on this. It is gridlock during the event, and they were counting on oh yeah, we've had parades elsewhere. We know you just need to go a few blocks over and you're fine. No. So thankfully they listened and they really beefed up having pre-game or pre-event activities to try to encourage people to head to the arena early. Also, we're a little bit under on attendance, which probably helped a little bit on the transportation side. Um,
Why was the attendance lower than anticipated?
so Chase Center attendance or Chase Center capacity is around 18,000. This event had a little bit larger build out, so it was around 17,000 was a seated capacity. All nights, I think we're in the 10,000 range. If you watched any of the broadcasts, you'll notice the camera angle stayed pretty low at the floor and not into the stands.
Is that because the Warriors were doing only just okay at that time?
No, what I was reading a bit online, there was a lot of criticism for the structure of how the events are. I think there used to be a lot of excitement around like the slam dunk challenge and the skills challenge, but it's gone on for years. I think some of that excitement has mellowed. There was varied opinions about the broadcast quality, and how they restructured it, that the All-Star game wasn't one game, but I think it was four,
It was 3 or 4.
3 or 4 games, kind of in a bracket style to get to the champion. And I think that they were just trying to find their spot, and it sounds like it didn't quite work this year for them. Yeah. So, the other thing just to know, Chase Center to begin with has very limited parking. Adding to that, a lot of the parking that is available there was used for production. So that made it even more limited. So some of the transportation needs is that we did need to do some street closures. We closed the 2 north and south fronting streets next to Chase Center, really for their broadcast compound. I'll show some photos of that in a moment. But other streets were closed more for crowd control before and after the game. Moscone Center, where we had the fan experience crossover, that's really common for us to close the street during large events. So that our team can do in their sleep, more or less. But one of the things that was one of the biggest challenges is we had a lot of requests to clear curb space near those hotels. Because they were having so many of those vehicles come in, they wanted staging space. They wanted good space to be able to pull up and serve their customers. They wanted to try to be good partners and not be circling the block, not be double parking. But it was a negotiation. They got a lot that they wanted just because it was kind of quick towards the end to get things done. But we did push back on blocks saying like, hey, this one you're on the side of a hotel, but this one is a major commercial block. How about we not do the major commercial block, but you can have the side of the hotel to stage on. The broadcast compound for a normal Chase Center event, all the broadcasting's inside the center. For these large events like this, like the finales, they do need to bring in a lot of extra broadcast equipment because you do have multiple international broadcasters. They requested and received fully closing 16th Street next to them. We had some back and forth if that was fully needed, and we tried to get them to keep a lane open. They only did at a bare minimum fire requirement. But that was a big thing. They needed it closed 3-4 days before the event started. They hired a contractor to do all the traffic control equipment, but we did have our parking control officers out there staffing it. Most staff, not overnight, so probably like 16, 18 hours a day, something like that. We had people out there. We did have some hiccups early on that what they asked for as a closure wasn't the date that they actually started the closure. They just kind of wanted to have some buffer. So we had gone out there and like removed a protected left turn phase, only for those lanes to still be open. So we had to get them to scramble and cone off that lane and some things like that for safety. Moscone Center, this is where they had their fan experience. This seemed to be pretty successful. They had a good turnout to it. It was actually SFPD that requested that the street be closed from a security management point of view. We were a little worried because it's not good optics to close a street and not have activation in it. Thankfully, there was some activation that came over time. They used it a lot for loading. A lot of school buses came in and out for some youth events. The other thing that happened, which was actually kind of an interesting challenge, is sponsors get a lot of attention from the NBA. I mean, they pay a lot of money. And one of them is Starry, the soda that's owned by Pepsi, and Pepsi's one of their big sponsors. Wanted to do this Starry Hoop Commute Shuttle, where they were going to get a cable car style motorized bus and drive people from one venue to another in a very Instagrammable decoration style. And we tried to be pretty upfront with them. We could not tell them no. As long as they were using a licensed provider, they were following all vehicle code regulations and such. The most we could tell them is we're not giving you curb space. You can use legal loading zones, but otherwise not giving you curb space. But we were really concerned that, in particular, they wanted to do this Saturday, so the same day as the parade. It was already a very congested area. There's not much curb space available in Union Square to begin with, and what little is there was already spoken for. So we tried to work with them and came up with an alternative, which was for them to set up stationary at Moscone. So I think that turned out as a good win-win. It gave some of that activation to show Howard Street as in use. And it also gave them an opportunity. They had a little bit bigger of a footprint. They had people giving out free sodas. They had like a little basketball hoop and a DJ. So I think it was a good win-win for them. The other interesting activation that happened that I think was a really good opportunity for the city. I'm sure everyone's aware, Union Square, Pal Street, having some challenges over the years and very high vacancy rate. NBA came to us with an idea called All-Star Alley, which was to activate a lot of the vacant retail as pop-ups. They didn't get them fully occupied, but they had a good, I don't know, 8-10 spaces filled. They worked with the city's Office of Workforce and Economic Development to work with various property owners to try to get the spaces filled. We supported it by doing some decorations of our facilities. One thing that we did that was fun was we made these NBA All-Star Alley street name signs. Something we normally don't do, and I think trying not to too much. It does take resources. They did pay us for it at least. And we were very clear, like, it cannot look like a street name sign. And I think we achieved that it looks very different. They did come to us with some other ideas. They had an idea of having colored stripes go right down the middle of the street to kind of signify this is the alley. And we're like, yeah, no, that doesn't work. We can't change street markings. They also wanted to do temporary decorative crosswalks, which in retrospect, we should have been maybe a little bit more guiding up front, but they came back to us with a material that was meant for indoor concrete use. And that was the same deal, like, no, we're not putting that under traffic, even for a couple days. We're not feeling comfortable with that. So yeah, this is Foot Locker, they had a space, Puma had a space. American Express, which have a little bit of a story about them. There was some NBA activities as well. Starry, again, was around. They had these little robots going around handing out free sodas. They had people with them. I don't know if they were running autonomous and just the people were there for safety, or if the people were fully running them. That, of course, stirred up a lot of opinions about the appropriateness of autonomous vehicles on the sidewalk, but it's something that was permitted through San Francisco Public Works. And as far as I heard, it didn't sound like any issues. There was only a few of them as well. Other thing that we did is we commonly decorate cable cars in support of large events. We had some decorated for the parade. We decorated 2 for All-Star. Our staff do all the decorations. It's actually a couple of the operators who volunteer their time to do it. But the NBA provided all of the materials, albeit at the very last minute, but we did get all the materials from them. So we had those 2. We also did some decorations around the cable car turnaround. We decorated the bollards. We let them put on, it was just a 3M temporary adhesive thing that went around it. And I actually didn't realize this. The rope that goes between the bollards is actual cable car cable. So it was a little mixed feelings about covering that up because that is a nice feature. Did pose a very interesting permitting challenge though, because I had to reach out to our attorneys and this didn't really fit any standard permit. And I mean, we all looked at it, felt it was pretty low risk, but still, you want the agency to be indemnified should something happen, should there be any damage, should someone slip and fall and claim it's because of the wrap, things like that. And it was looking like we might have to do a real estate license agreement, which is very involved. Thankfully, we were able to work with Public Works and they kind of shoehorned it into a permit that it was an encroachment permit. And even though it wasn't like in a public works facility because it was a city facility, it basically let us put it on paper. Hey, you're responsible should anything bad happen here. Oh, the other thing, press conference was held here to open Ulster Alley. Initial thoughts were to actually have a cable car run through a ribbon to cut it. I was actually really surprised when our leadership said, yeah, we could figure that out. But as we worked through it and it was figuring out like what type of ribbon and make sure it cuts easily and things like that, they decided we were just too close to the event. And at first we were just going to stage a cable car like you see here. But then it rained, and no one wanted to get wet, so they moved it indoors instead. Communications, this was actually a little bit light touch for us on the public outreach side. It was really viewed as the NBA's event. They were the ones communicating with neighbors at the various facilities. They had a lot of robust information for their attendees, but we still did work. How San Francisco's organized is a bunch of, unlike a lot of cities, various agencies have their own websites. So SFMTA has our own, then there's the citywide sf.gov. We worked with the digital services team. They created a landing page. A lot of the information was housed in our website on how to get around with really three primary audiences: residents, businesses, and employees. Basically, people who are just trying to live their life during the events. That was probably the biggest group that hopefully we were trying to reach. Next was ticketed attendees. This was largely covered by the NBA, but we did make sure to have information for them. Then the third group is, I was trying to think of how to call them. I landed on non-ticketed attendees. These are people who just wanted to show up at the venues, to be there, to maybe see a celebrity come in and out, not realizing that they all go through the basement garage instead. But it was to give information on how to get to and from the events. And that was the biggest wild card for us, is we could kind of figure out how many people were going to be riding transit that were attending, but these non-ticketed attendees were a big wild card. Marketing and advertisement. There was opportunities. NBA did some buyouts on like one of the light rail platforms in front of Chase Center. They also did a bunch through BART and Muni stations downtown. There's this kind of QR code campaign that was going on. I didn't get too much into the details on it. Our marketing people were doing it, but I think if you scan and check in at certain businesses, you get a discount or a little something. We had several light rail trains that were wrapped. And this is, I mentioned American Express before, something that I learned. Chase, obviously, is the name sponsor of Chase Center and is a sponsor of the Warriors. They are not an NBA sponsor. American Express is. And obviously, those are two very big competitors. And it ended up being, there was like some, I don't know if like miscommunication or what, but we thought the advertiser, because all these advertisers are done through a vendor for us, we thought they were fully aligned, and we found out relatively last minute that Chase bought several LRV wraps. They actually had a lot of activations. They had something at the Metreon. They had a bunch of advertisements up at 4th and King Caltrain station, which they were all allowed to do. The LRV was problematic because there is actually an exclusion zone for competing advertisers in front of Chase Center that included the tracks. And since none of us actually ever saw that agreement, but apparently we were a party to it, there was a big scramble to just make sure that those trains never go on that piece of track, which is really tough because they were housed in the yard that is only connected by that track. So we had to move them to a different yard. It ended up being a bit of a hassle, but kind of an interesting side thing that I learned during all of this, some of the backgrounds that happened. just like any other Chase Center event, your ticket to the game was your fare to ride Muni, except cable car. We extended this to the Moscone NBA crossover ticket holders as well. This is kind of everything that fits in that isn't on any of the slides I had otherwise. A lot of my work was just a general operational preparedness. We had a lot of the street closures, the parking. We have a special events team that works on that can, like I said, the Moscone closure, they can probably do in their sleep at this point. What I was doing was really just bringing all the groups together to make sure that we had one cohesive plan and we're ready for this. And a big part of that was working with all of our frontline teams to make sure we have staffing contingencies. The Chinese New Year parade is actually one of our highest call out days of the year. Add to it that it's also a 3-day weekend. So we were very concerned on staff, but at the same time, I'm sure everyone's aware we're not doing great from a budget point of view. So we also didn't want to be paying a bunch of staff just to be sitting around. So it was working out trying to find that balance, having them ready. Our parking control officers were really doing a lot to help manage traffic throughout the city, especially during the parade. That comes with, again, on the budget side, a big funding trade-off. While their time was paid for by the Warriors, the loss of citation revenue isn't made up there, so that ends up being a little bit of a financial impact. We really beefed up facilities and custodial staffing, a bunch of frontline supervisors. We had standby mechanics, standby for overhead systems, for our track, all that type of stuff. Then also all of our operational and just coordination staff going on. Decent amount of contingency planning went into this, a lot of what ifs. What if we lose the T line for some reason? There's a crash, there's a mechanical problem, a vehicle breaks down that we can't move right away. So we had plans in place for, okay, how do we get buses in there? We did actually have one minor crash happen just a few blocks away between one of our trains and a private vehicle. And normally I would say hit and run is not good. In this case, they left, and that meant we didn't have to deal with the other party, and we were able to restore service a lot quicker, at least. So, of course, still would have preferred they stayed and dealt with that. A lot went into security planning. I wasn't as involved with this. It was really led SFPD. Then we have our security team that works with them. Obviously, the event itself is a security risk. It was SEER rated. I forget what the acronym stands for, but it was a Department of Homeland Security rated event. It wasn't at the level that it brought in additional like federal resources, but it was something that was being actively monitored. I know FBI counterterrorism was actively monitoring other groups. Personally, and I know a lot of people talking to, I was more worried about the parade. Keep in mind, this wasn't too long after the vehicle-based attacks in New Orleans. I think Germany had one as well. And obviously, a lot of political issues, especially around the Chinese community. And so that was also a very big concern at the time. Thankfully, nothing bad happened. There were a bunch of archer barriers, these that you see here, that were deployed along the parade route. I actually had never seen it before. If you're ever curious, just do a YouTube search of like archer barrier illustration. It's interesting how it works is if you run into it, they just kind of like crunch around the car and bring the car to a stop. So it doesn't like stop them on a dime. You're still going to have some force going, but it greatly reduces the amount of potential that's there. There are tabletop exercises around some what if scenarios, and just a lot of interagency coordination. San Francisco is a big bureaucratic mess at times, and thankfully we had someone. She's housed in the Department of Emergency Management, but was really working on behalf of the mayor's office to help coordinate and bring us all together. During the event, there's a phase that I like to call coordinating the coordinating. Is everyone has their own operations and coordination centers running. We run our primary one out of our transportation management center, which picture over here. We have a secondary one in our parking control officers group that kind of runs their own operations. We had people staffed at the police department. We had people staffed at Chase Center has an operations center and at the Citywide Emergency Operations Center. There was also, like I mentioned, FBI was running their center, and the NBA had their global security headquarters, which is in New Jersey. How it went pretty good from a transportation point of view. I already mentioned the attendance was lower. There was some criticisms of maybe the events themselves, but that was everything inside the arena. Outside of the arena, things went pretty smoothly. We did have a few hiccups, especially the night of the parade, where some of our transportation plans didn't get implemented as intended. But we were able to recover and get things moving. There were no big complaints about people having access from their hotel to the arena. No major security incidents happened. Did hear from PD, especially later in the night. They were dealing with your usual drunkenness and things like that after the event. There was a concert series, and forget who all was there, but it was artists that you wouldn't expect maybe a high level of sobriety of people leaving the event. We did unfortunately have one parking control officer who got assaulted. Someone really didn't like that they were being told that they couldn't drive someplace. Thankfully, the officer's fine, and the person did actually get arrested because they were able to get the license plate and description over to the police. And otherwise, just good city activation. I think the All-Star Alley worked out really well. I went down there. It's probably some of the most lively I've seen Powell Street in a while. It was nice to see all that activation. Then as far as what's next, this is the first of 3 major sporting events coming to the Bay Area. We have the Super Bowl coming in February, then FIFA World Cup, which I should know, I think is in June next year. Those are going to be held at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. So very different footprint, that it's not all within San Francisco, but we do know that there's going to be fan experiences. I think NFL's already expressed interest in doing something at Moscone. FIFA, the Bay Area Host Committee, which is putting everything on for FIFA, is still figuring out what that's going to look like. And learning the dynamics around international soccer is very different than domestic sports as far as like how teams interact with each other, how fans interact. So there's going to be a lot that needs to go into figuring that type of stuff out. I'm tentatively going to be working on these again. I've heard my name's floated out there, but I actually haven't been directly told. I do have a meeting with my division director in about a month, I think, to talk about it and see what the role is going to be. I mean, I enjoy doing it, but it does come with a trade-off of I do have another job that I'm supposed to be doing the rest of the time. So it does a lot fall on my team when I'm doing this. Because especially when you're getting towards the final few weeks, I'm full-time, more than full-time just on this. And so that does mean other things get pushed aside or others are having to pick up where I'm not doing my regular work. But still a good opportunity and interesting to be part of these. And that's it for me. Questions or yeah.
How long was the planning period in terms of how far ahead was your planning started for this?
I'm trying to remember. So this was in February. I think I and Ernest really got involved in maybe November. Had hoped for a little bit more time on it, and hoping that we can try to push that on these future events. Some of the work was going in advance. There were some other things with Warriors didn't bring in a consultant until later to really work on this. They were trying to do a lot in-house, and I think they realized that they needed some external expertise. And once that consultant was on, things really started ramping up. Other?
What percentage of your time would you say you spent on the contingency planning?
I actually didn't spend that much. It was really our operational people who did. I mean, we have a lot of fairly standard contingency plans in place for this. There wasn't the biggest one of the challenges that we had is that the parade and the event were actually relatively independent of each other. There was really no cross interaction of what our plans looked like other than they both were happening at the same time. and that when one thing went wrong, it trickled into the other. So that was maybe a little bit of a challenge, but we already have a lot of contingency plans in place for losing rail at Chase Center, for losing access during the parade, but it did need to take a little bit more in this case to be ready for that.
What kind of, consulting SFMTA needed, on this kind of work,
So
how much was in-house and?
everything was in-house from MTA's point of view. The consulting was from the Warriors. They had he was out of Virginia, but he actually has done a lot of events at Moscone Center and at Chase Center, so he knew the city pretty well. He was actually more of an event transportation consultant, so running all the bus service, but they expanded his scope to do a bunch of the other planning.
Is there any spillover to airport facilities, like were there people flying in?
Oh yeah. Airport wasn't the three big airports were involved and the couple smaller like Hayward and San Carlos were also involved for private jets. I didn't interact with them really, but I know that our citywide coordinator had been working with them on making sure that facilities were ready. I think they did have like ambassadors in the airport from the NBA to help greet people. Oh, is there something? Oh, I saw something in the chat here. Did you see higher than average weekend transit ridership due to more events or decrease due to detours? I actually don't have that information. I have to imagine it was up, especially with a parade, as well as people going to Moscone Center, but I actually don't have that information. What recommendations would you have for smaller agencies having to get the word out that their riders, communities on medium-sized events? What methods work best in informing those in the three groups about traffic service impacts that can be adopted by other agencies? So this one, I might lean a little bit more on my experience from working on APEC before. For this event, we were relatively light touch on the amount of communication that went out. We honestly didn't have that big of an impact for our regular service for NBA events. The bigger impact was the parade itself. And I know our team, and that's a pretty well-known event, and I know our team has a lot of kind of pre-prepared information, and also the event organizers have things there. APEC was much bigger on what the impacts would be. That it was really leveraging media, whether or not we liked it. They got out there with a lot of information. Some of it needed corrections, but it was really trying to leverage digital campaigns and people on the ground. That was a big one, is getting ambassadors out there, especially multilingual ambassadors, to be able to help direct people where reroutes are in place. That's done for us a combination of contracted staff and just office staff being temporarily reassigned on a voluntary basis to be out there as an ambassador.
You brought up APEC.
Yeah.
I guess obviously a very different kind of event vibe-wise.
Yes.
And remembering your APEC presentation was a lot more focused on kind of security. Yeah, I guess if you want to just talk a little bit more about sort of the difference involved in something.
Yeah. So I presume everyone is at least high level familiar with APEC that came through a year and a half ago. A big part of that was some very crucial parts of the city got fenced in, like literally locked down. And that included places like Mission Street, where a lot of our transit that connects to downtown gets pumped through. We didn't have that here, that we had that much loss. In downtown, we lost Howard. That's relatively standard. Then we lost the parade route, but again, that's something that we do on a relatively regular basis. The parade was probably the bigger impact of the two events on our service. The vibe with APEC was just very different in the sense that it was coming from a security point of view. I would find it funny because Secret Service would ask us if we were okay with something. And I feel like that's your mom saying, "Hey, do you mind taking out the trash?" It's not really a question. And in a way, it kind of helped because we did get to somewhat lean on them and somewhat say, "Hey, it's for security. This is why we're doing it." Whereas here, we were aware that we're probably going to be open to a little bit more scrutiny of why we make choices we made. Part of that was we had a very big discussion about how much supplemental transit service to run to Chase, especially with all the private shuttles, all the private car services. We were trying to balance, like, we don't want to be putting out empty trains, but at the same time, we don't want the image of there being packed platforms and we don't have service there. So we did lean on providing more service than we would even do for a regular Chase event, and it seemed to work pretty well. Things flowed. But maybe that's one of the big differences is we were not moving really anyone for APEC that was related with the event. Yeah, maybe some staff, some media, other visitors, but we weren't really moving people for APEC, whereas we were moving people for this. And also people just stayed away from APEC. Like the city was absolutely quiet those few days, despite the mayor and others trying to discourage people from doing that.
Obviously there were events in Oakland. I think there was maybe an event on Treasure Island, like a smaller event. Was there any impact with like getting people onto Treasure Island or?
I don't remember Treasure Island.
I
You
don't
might
think
know
it
better
was-
than I do.
Yeah,
The Oakland events, the biggest thing that we told them is, hey, coming back Saturday afternoon, the bridge is going to be bad. And try to encourage them to take BART instead. I know BART did ramp up their staffing at Coliseum. BART PD had more staffing out there. There were a couple events in Oakland itself. What is it called? Day of Service, I think they call it, where players go out into the community. They went to some schools in Oakland. They asked us how to get no parking signs there, and I'm just like, I don't know if it's in New York City. We did have a point of contact that put them with, I don't know if they ever really followed up or if they just double parked. But the events outside the city, actually, at least from what I saw, I didn't hear any major issues with it.
You said like it's a couple weeks to set up for these events, like how long does it take to shut it down or like break it down to?
Oh, demobilization's quick.
Oh.
Yeah. Tear down goes pretty quick. I think the broadcast compound was fully opened. So the last event was Sunday. I think it was open by Monday night. Moscone, Howard Street at Moscone didn't have really anything in the street at that point. That Starry bus just pulls away. They pick up their racks. I think that was open that night. Demobilization is a lot quicker.
On the arch barrier that you're showing.
Yeah.
Are those rented from a private vendor?
So that was all done by SFPD. My understanding is that they do have a certain amount in-house. There is also an interagency like loan system.
Okay.
So they were pulling them from other northern or throughout California. Then I think, yeah, some were rented as well.
I'll be interested to see how it functions. That
Yeah.
sounds interesting.
Yeah.
For like these major events, has there any like coordination or outreach done to maybe like Google Maps or
Yes.
Google,
Yeah, that's a really good point. We do work with, we have a team that normally works with navigation providers for any street changes we make. We put in a no turn on red, we put in a no left turn sign, things like that. We have a process for submitting that. In this case, it was really done through that, the NBA's consultant, Brad. He worked directly with the three main providers, Google, TomTom, and Apple. Those three really feed into a lot of the systems. He also worked with Uber and Lyft on setting up the venues where you have designated pickup points. and also Waymo on setting up exclusion zones. And they were trying to walk a fine line there, like that's regardless of what you think of autonomous vehicles, that is kind of an attraction to people visiting the city. And knew that people would want to use it, but also didn't want the risk of it messing up right in the area. So they did exclude, and Waymo did it voluntarily. I don't think they could be actually told to do it unless the state stepped in. But they did exclude areas immediate around the arena and also around Moscone.
Is maybe a follow-up on that is that like sort of a routine process these days for SFMTA and others to communicate with
Yeah.
map providers to kind of update those signage, etc. And to what extent does that go unheard?
I think we have pretty good success with it. Occasionally, we do run into issues where things don't get put in. The other thing that happens at times is sometimes our permits will say it starts at 12:01 a.m. We know very well they're not going to go out there until 7 a.m. But technically, they can close the street at 12:01 a.m. And that's the feed that Google gets is 12:01 a.m. So if you're driving out there at 3 a.m., you're being told the street's closed when it's not. And same thing happens on the opening, is they'll just open it once it's ready. For our special events, we have a process that's called ISCOT. Don't ask me to remember what the acronym it is. It's an interdepartmental committee that oversees street closures related to special events. Through that permitting process, we have a way that we have a feed that automatically goes to the various navigation providers. So that's kind of taken care of on a routine basis there. Some of the challenges that came in through this is not all the closures were ISCOT permitted. Some of them was PD making, from a security point of view, decisions to close streets. And those didn't always get in, especially if it was done a little bit more on the fly. But some of them were known in advance and they were able to notify the navigation providers.
Final thing,
Yeah.
I think you mentioned about emergency vehicles. They did have access, narrow access, but they did have access.
They did have access. They agreed to, I think, a little bit less than they would have liked.
Okay.
But the fire marshal did sign off on the access on that street. It was narrow enough that they said absolutely no other vehicles. We cannot deal with even a broken down bike in the middle of the lane. So they maintained access. Thankfully, nothing bad happened. And keep in mind, this was right after the LA fires. So things around access were probably pretty high on their minds. And there's a whole emergency medical plan that's all built out through our fire department and EMS agency for events like this as well. Any other questions?
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, thank you.
Did the NBA say thank you?
Yes, they did at least.
How do they do that? Just like verbally or?
Yeah, I mean, there are many events and such where they think, and we're working closely with people. We had a big group text going as well, so there's a lot of thanks right at the end of the night on the last night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they send any like monumental gift to the city or anything like that?
We have a very strict gift policy. Got like a little lapel pin, a challenge coin, things like that. One of those All-Star Alley signs I got to keep. So that was a gift to myself because I asked for I could have it.
Yeah, they didn't send like a gold NBA trophy for the office or anything like
No.
that. City Hall.
Yeah.